Hey, thanks, Steve. I appreciate the invite. And I don't know. I mean, you've probably been on plenty of these flights before. Maybe you could tell me, how do we get to State College?
Actually, you'll fly right into State. If you're with the team, you'll fly right into State College.
Okay, well, that's easy. I think for the football teams, possibly for the basketball team, that's great. I think it's going to be interesting to see how all these other highly competitive Olympic sports, travel around in all these situations. But this is the brave new world of college athletics, and I mean, I think the Huskies are not only incredibly fortunate, but also incredibly excited to be aligning with a conference that just has, as much tradition and success in every single way as the Big Ten has. And there's a lot of sadness and just confusion and disappointment that what's had to happen has happened. And yet at the same time, I think there's tremendous days ahead here for the Huskies. We're really excited.
Tony, what was it like over the past year watching this play out in public all the time? Whether it's UCLA in December and finally, they reached some deal with Cal, or going to the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas and there's no deal, and you go to the big Pac-12 media day, there's no deal. What's it been like for you watching this play out?
I think I've put a lot of thought into that over the last couple of days since the dramatic events of Friday have become formalized. And I think, there's a lot of people who are really, again, kind of confused and maybe even a little upset that the Pac-12 has disintegrated, that it's essentially dead. And so there's kind of like a mourning and a grieving process going on for people who have been fans of a Husky team and a Husky program that's been aligned with that conference for 108 years. And the way that I'm kind of processing it is it is a death of sorts, but there was a terminal diagnosis that was leveled 13 months ago. And I think some people also kind of saw at that point when USC and UCLA decided to move on that, okay, there's no way in the short to medium term this might seem somewhat normal, but there's no way in the long term this stays the way that it is, just the way that college sports continues to evolve. And so, I think some people began to move on, and I think some people, you go back and look 5 years back, you could kind of start to see some signs of unhealth. And so, I think Washington's a really proud program, proud tradition, 2 national championships, and then has really been resurrected in the past decade with Chris Peterson being here, and now Kalen DeBoer doing a fantastic job, going 11-2 in his first year. And I just think there are some people around Washington and likely also around Oregon and USC that kind of got tired of the Pac-12 being a bit of a punchline in college football. It's known for the after dark zaniness. It's known for whatever, but what it's not really known for recently is winning national championships. And I think there's a deep hunger and desire to be competing at the highest level, from a lot of programs out here. And so I think there's this great hope and anticipation that aligning with the Big Ten will really level the playing field in a lot of ways. And we're not just going to be, Steve, I'll tell you some stories. My first year out here, we had a really meaningful mid-November game on the road at Stanford. And anytime you play at Stanford, there's 5,000 to 10,000 people in the stands. It's just, right. It doesn't even matter if they're good. That's just kind of what it is there. And we were on FS1 on a Friday night playing that game. And our fans, I'm looking at social media as the game's going on, our fans are losing their mind. And I'm like, why is everybody so upset? It's because there was a truck race on FS1 that was airing instead of Washington Stanford. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that doesn't happen 3:30 on CBS. That doesn't happen on NBC whenever they're going to play the primetime games. And so that's why I just really feel like those are the kind of things that the Washingtons, the Oregons, the USCs, the teams that aspire to play college football at the highest level they're really, really excited about now having that true, being that billboard on the side of the highway in college football now, really going to have the attention and the eyeballs on them.
No question. Tony, in '83, when Washington played Penn State in the Aloha Bowl, I was the third announcer on the network at that time, so we were allowed to send one, and it was Gil Santos, the play-by-play guy, and the Washington Penn State broadcast was split between the two play-by-play guys. Obviously, the 2017 Fiesta Bowl, I did that game. But also means that Penn State has never played a game at Husky Stadium. So tell everybody here what Husky Stadium is like on a game day, considering the fans here have never really experienced it before.
You know what, Steve? I think, and I got to check the record book, I think Penn State played the first ever game at Husky Stadium in 1920.
How about that?
And it might have been the second game. I can't remember, but it was like way back. And it is unlike anything. I mean, we call it the greatest setting in college football. If you get here in September or October before the gray kind of settles in for a good 6 months, it's spectacular. You've got the sailgating off to the right. I'm watching practice right now, so I'm in the stadium and I'm looking off to my right, Lake Washington. Yeah. You'll have sunshine. You'll have hundreds of boats out there. Off to the left is campus, and then beyond that, with all of the enormous Pacific Northwest pines, you've got off to the right, you've got the Cascade Mountains. Off to the left, you got the Olympics. They're always snow-capped, and then back behind the stadium and from the press box, a spectacular view of Mount Rainier, which is the most prominent mountain in the lower 48 states. And so you really truly have something special, not just in the setting, but then these cantilever roofs that are put on both ends, intended to keep the stands dry as much as it rains, but it also keeps the noise in. Yeah. And so it's just 70,000 people screaming off of a lot of aluminum, and it's really as loud as any other place in college football.
It is something I personally can't wait to see because I've seen it on TV so many times, especially the sailgating part, which I think is, look, you'll love, when you come here, Tony, you're going to love the scene of the tailgating around here. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable. It won't be sailgating. Yeah. We have Spring Creek, and you can't even put a little boat on there. But you're going to find that to be phenomenal when you come here. The mountains aren't as high, by the way, but we have mountains.
Yeah.
You're going to discover when you go other places there aren't any mountains.
I'll tell you, we have 100, and I grew up in Ohio, by the way, so I'm familiar with Penn State and the Midwest and everything. Sure. And as this whole news came out, I mean, I kind of just spent some time on YouTube watching videos of the whiteouts against Auburn that you guys had a couple years ago, and watching Jump Around in Camp Randall, and watching, Iowa's traditions with the Children's Hospital. And I mean, it's this kind of stuff that, like, it generates goosebumps, really, truly, to know that, like, okay, that's what we're going to step into. So we're thrilled. We're excited. It is, I mean, just imagine if Penn State was leaving to join the Pac-12. Like, imagine how weird that would be. Like, there's a lot of weirdness and a little bit of upset that this even has to happen, and sadness and the loss of tradition, but also there's just a lot of excitement for the future.
Yeah, no question about that. So let's get to the other part of campus, because this is a multi-sport deal, and part of that also means that instead of just playing at Husky Stadium for football, that means it's Heck Edmondson Pavilion. I guess it's been renovated, 10,000, and I understand the fans are right on top of the court. What's the atmosphere like in there?
Super intimate. It's, I think it's kind of got the charm of like a Cameron Indoor. Now the team has to be super competitive in order for it to be that ruckus.
Right.
But it's kind of a combination of the Cameron Indoor intimacy and kind of the Hinkle Fieldhouse with you're just kind of almost in a cathedral of college basketball. Yeah. It was erected in 1927. It still has natural daylight that comes in through these arched windows that are up there. And it's a really cool, and the way that UW is set up, so the football stadium's right on the lake, you can see that, but that's the entire athletic complex. So the softball stadium's on the water, the baseball stadium's on the water, and there's a tunnel that actually connects. The tunnel the football team runs down onto the field, that same tunnel actually connects to the basketball arena. So on those doubleheader days I have in November, I mean, I just literally I just walk from one to the next. It's pretty great.
Yeah, Jordan Center's across the street from Beaver Stadium, and that tunnel thing, that's the way Virginia Tech set up, right? Castle Coliseum right at the Lane Stadium. You just got to go through the back and tunnel through, you're in. So now you talk about the loss of tradition. Now, the Apple Cup, TV networks care deeply about a Washington-Penn State game because it's going to bring the casual fan to the table. The casual fan probably is not going to go to the table to watch Washington State, but from Spokane to Seattle to Tacoma to Bellingham, they do. What's the meaning of that game, and will Washington continue to go to Pullman and play that game?
If you're looking for a Big Ten analogy, I always kind of felt like Washington, Oregon is kind of like Michigan, Ohio State.
Okay.
But then Washington State is kind of like Michigan State.
Gotcha.
Like there's a real big brother, little brother kind of feel going on. And it's also kind of like in the state of Washington, there's a lot of Huskies that marry Cougs. There's a lot of, people that are high school friends and then they go to the two separate colleges, right? And so these are just deep, deep ties. Where I think everybody in the state wants to see that game continue to be played. Honestly, Steve, I know there's an appetite on Washington's part to pursue it. I don't know how Washington State feels at this moment. I think any, feeling would be valid given what's going on out here. But the question I have is, in a world where it's so important for a football team to play 7 home games for the athletic revenue, we're going to probably play 9 conference games in the Big Ten. Some years that would be 5 at home. Some years that would be 4.
Right.
Well, how do you do a home and home with anybody non-conference in that scenario and guarantee that you're going to get the 7 home games, right? Like, I mean, I just don't know. If you were to do the home and home on a year where it was gonna, I don't know, it's just a lot to figure out. Hard to explain, but just a lot to figure out.
Yeah.
And I really don't know which way it's going to go. I've even heard some rumors that they might play 10 conference games in the Big Ten. So who knows where this thing's going? But I'll tell you this: the Apple Cup is a super meaningful rivalry, and I know that Husky fans will want to try to continue it.
What is the atmosphere like usually leading up to a Washington-Oregon game?
Atmosphere is kind of hard. It's kind of hard to describe. I just know, like, as far as that feeling close to the program, it's like the two teams and the fan bases the two teams really respect each other, but the fan bases kind of hate each other. And I really, that's why I draw that Michigan-Ohio State comparison.
Yeah.
Because, like, they can't stand each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's different from Michigan State and Washington State. Like, there's like a familial thing to that rivalry.
Sure.
Where Washington and Oregon is just kind of hatred. And so, there's a couple iconic plays in the program's history. Washington was by far the better program from the beginning of time until like 1994.
Right.
And then Oregon all of a sudden kind of turned things around. But, there's a play in 1994 where Kenny Wheaton intercepts a goal line pass, runs it back for a touchdown when the Huskies were on the door of winning the game. And they play that video 20 times whenever we're in Austin Stadium. And then conversely, we like when Jake Browning pointed at the Oregon player as he waltzed into the end zone. So, like, there's just that level of animosity between the two, and that's what makes it really fun. And now it might be the final game of the season every year.
Yeah. In fact, that 94 team played Penn State in the Rose Bowl, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
Yeah, and Penn State completed its undefeated season. this Washington football team this year, and you mentioned you're at practice, Kalen DeBoer, formerly offensive coordinator at Indiana. Michael Penix was his quarterback, so Penn State fans have seen him play several times. This is a college football playoff contender this year. Why?
Well, so it's kind of unprecedented from what I've seen, but they had 8 draft-eligible players that all could have been picked.
Right.
And all 8 decided to come back. And so the offense is going to be spectacular. They do lose 3 seniors on the offensive line, but they've got some depth at that position. So I think as long as they stay healthy at those key positions, I mean, Penix has a history of injuries, and that's going to be huge. But as long as they stay healthy, they should be great on the offensive side. I think defensively, they're going to take a real big step forward. It was kind of an uncharacteristic year last year, decimated by injuries, had some losses in the transfer portal before the season. I think they've built that up. They got an all Big 12 cornerback from Oklahoma State who transferred in, a really good veteran linebacker from USC transferred in, and then they're getting healthy at some spots with some of their really talented players that weren't able to be at full go last year. So big expectations, but also way harder schedule than a year ago. So, you know, those things balance out. And last year the Huskies were 11-2, but you know, literally just one possession away in their 2 losses on the road. So, you know, can they be that close? And then you're in those close games, then it comes down to a couple plays here and there. But it's a tough schedule. I mean, I also wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe take a step back in the win-loss column, but even be a better team. Yeah. And I think the focus for these Huskies is just, you know, they're all saying they want to win the national championship, but I know the team goal is they want to win the final Pac-12 season.
Obviously, in basketball, you'll end up going everywhere. But in football this particular year, you do have to play at Stanford. You have to play at Oregon State. You also have the game at USC, so but that's not going to enter into this question. You got to play at Michigan State, too. And you have to play at Arizona. Do you think it might be surreal, especially when you go to Corvallis, because it's the last time?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. And you picked up on it in a way that, like, I don't even know what it's going to feel like to go into that stadium for the final time, knowing that we're probably never coming back here. But that's the case for every conference road game except USC. Yeah. You know, I mean, that's just the way it goes this season. So it's strange, but those are tough places. The Huskies historically have a hard time winning in the desert. Corvallis is tricky for everybody in the Pac-12. It is going to be an interesting season, to say the least.
Tony, you do one thing about SiriusXM, we get to hear everybody. You do a phenomenal job. I cannot wait to get into stadiums and share stadiums with you, because I think this is going to be exciting as the years go by.
I'm flattered. Thank you for saying that. I look up to you, and good luck. Can't wait till we get to meet in person.
Have a great season, Tony. Look forward to it. This will be far from the last time we talk.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. Go Dogs.